Hi everyone, it's summer again, so it's really hot, and this is video 42, which I nearly called the meaning of life, the universe and everything, because it kind of is in a way, because of that Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy thing. The thing is that it is kind of about the meaning of everything, in the sense that this video is called "The UN Brings the World into the Anthropocene," and because it would kind of make sense in a media way that the UN has been responsible for the whole of the postmodern age. So if they are seen at the very end to be kind of saving the day and bringing in the new age and solving the problem of the old age, well, you know, wouldn't that be a thing? So this is Antonio Guterres, 13th of May, 2026. Africa's continued exclusion from permanent representation in the Security Council is a historical injustice and indefensible. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres stresses that reform is essential to ensure the Security Council is able to act with legitimacy and effectiveness. This is not about privileges or symbolism, he said. It is about ensuring that the Council is fit for purpose. So here it is at last. This video is on what will change. Now, if we go back to the idea of the relationship between the diachronic and the synchronic, which we use to describe history and the way events move forward according to the patterns which emerge over time, the situation which exists at any one time is driven forward by the situation which is developing over time. So it's a very simple set of principles. It's a kind of model that sort of locks together, and it gives a four-dimensional model. It turns a three-dimensional model of what exists at the time into a four-dimensional moving model, which you could imagine as a storyline or a timeline of events. So, we can ascribe meaning and we can ascribe significance to different events and see how one affected the other and what factors were involved in the effect of one event causing others to happen, and then looking at the kind of size and shape of that in terms of the big picture, in terms of where everything exists in relation to each other. So in this sense, we can see the situation having a particular structure and how it's all connected, as I've said in previous videos, in terms of the question of what is connected to what. And Professor Zhang from Predictive History said in an interview with Diary of a CEO, which is available on YouTube, it's becoming apparent that, well, this is his analysis, that he thinks that Israel, the US, Iran, and Russia are going to become the protagonists in what will become known as World War III. And I kind of like this theory, even though I don't like the idea of World War III, thanks. And but it is speculation, and I think there will be a different outcome. But the way that he works is to make several predictions and then catch up with them later to discuss their outcome. And so this is why I like this theory, is because of its analysis of the structure of the situation and the agendas which are happening in this center ground, where we're seeing this war in Ukraine and this war in the Middle East. And he says, according to his theoretical approach, these four agendas are going to be the reason for World War III. If there's a World War III, then this is how it happened. And he predicts that it's 80% to 90% likely that this is going to happen, with China sitting this one out. I agree with the idea of China sitting this one out. But I don't think it will come to a world war. What he does is he uses the analogy of a chess set for, he uses the king as the political system that they have, and then the queen for their grand strategy. Knights, bishops, and rooks are what he calls their attack vectors or offensive strategies, and pawns as the allies that they just simply use to their advantage, which are kind of things within their sphere of influence or the influence of this agenda. He says, okay, the US is a democracy which is being pushed towards a civil war because of divisions between Republicans and Democrats. Its grand strategy has thus become to rely on its national defense strategy to create a fortress of America. And this they're using to push chaos onto every other country so they can sell arms and get other nations to absorb their national debt. He largely uses game theory to analyze the way nations behave, as if it's a game in which capitalist nations try to compete with each other in a friendly way, while the BRICS alliance, which remember emerged out of the communist bloc during the Cold War, seeks to counterbalance Western capitalist influence. So that is that kind of cavalier sort of attitude that anybody with a voice has got money, and we're all players, and then anybody who's not doesn't matter. So let's all be friends, because obviously that's the kind of ethics of money, and then a lot of the moneyed society, and obviously the Christian religion is used to create more tolerance in the working classes and more kind of reason to be allies, particularly then with the communism in the Cold War. That's another reason to band together around NATO and things like that. So he's saying that the attack vectors are technological supremacy, aerial supremacy, the US dollar, which it uses to attract investment to its cause if it's moving the situation forward and if it has a plan, and this attracts other foreign investment. Whereas if they're just sitting there losing money, then it doesn't matter what the population is experiencing. It doesn't matter what workers' wages are or healthcare or whatever. You know, if they're generating money through the military campaigns, through this is another one, supercharging the US military production is also attracting investment. So it means that the government has the money, it has the power to do things in the way that it wants to do things, and the way it sees the Republicans at the moment see the Democrats is that they are, in trying to create fairness, they're just creating weakness, and then the government doesn't have the power to even do anything. And then the world obviously is up in flames, because then Iran and Russia and China get the upper hand, and that's what the kind of Republican theory is at the moment. US propaganda, they control a lot of the world's media. Technology, with wars obviously increasing US military production and upgrades to technology. Controlling choke points like the Strait of Hormuz, where the Middle Eastern nations export 20% of the world's oil, the Panama Canal in South America, which links the Pacific to the Atlantic, the Suez Canal, which links the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean, and the Strait of Malacca in Far East Asia, where China needs to import Iranian oil. And there's also the Strait of Gibraltar. There's a deal with the Moroccan government over the Strait of Gibraltar. So there's this kind of like elements of this strategy, which include alliances with foreign countries, and also the massive US Navy, which has been seizing Iranian tankers and Russian tankers and things like that around the world, reliant on this kind of overall naval strategy. So its pawns are UK, Europe, the entire Western Hemisphere, as we've seen the way it seized the Venezuelan president Maduro and took control of its oil trade between South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and Malaysia, creates a chain which effectively stops China from marauding into the Pacific unchecked by anybody, and creates an alternative maritime vector, which, supposing China took Taiwan, then it would break that chain, and Japan really doesn't want that to happen, because then China could block everyone else, and unfortunately this is just the way that it works. So we've got Russia. Okay, it's an autocracy where the Putin has absolute power, but also they have the problem of what to replace Putin with, who compares himself with Peter the Great. So its grand strategy is known as the Third Rome strategy, in the sense that the first Rome was the Roman Empire, then there was the Byzantine, and then Russia and its Orthodox religion is going to inherit the position the third position. So this is after the Tsars. So the Tsars are another word for Caesar, along with the German word Kaiser for the German kings, which also meant Caesar. And they were united by the Holy Roman Empire, whereas Russia was part of the Holy Alliance with Germany when it was Prussia and Austria. At the end of the just before World War One in the US, in the European Congress system of the 1800s, they were particularly Christian and particularly conservative, whereas Britain and France were more kind of progressive and supported Belgium independence and things like that. So its attack vectors are that its size makes it invincible. Nobody's been able to invade Russia. Orthodox religion, they want to use Orthodox Christianity to unite all their people under one kind of reasonable kind of philosophy. Its artillery gives it the best land army in the world, arguably, and a shadow shuttle fleet, a kind of dark fleet of anonymous ships which carry Russian oil around the world to avoid sanctions. But these ships and Iranian oil tankers as well are being seized by the US Navy around the world, and including in the Gulf of Mexico. Its pawns are, generally speaking, its people. It has blind belief really in whatever it's doing, fearless soldiers who are not afraid to die. So now to Israel, which has a mixed system of democracy and theocracy, but Tel Aviv apparently does not get along with Jerusalem. Its grand strategy is the Greater Israel Plan to conquer the Middle East from the east of the Nile in Egypt to the west of the Euphrates in Iraq, which is where kind of Babylon was. So it is about ancient Semitic territory, and its attack vectors are Mossad, the most powerful intelligence agency in the world, which can infiltrate and undermine various other political systems, according to Dr. Zhang. The Jewish diaspora, exodus of people spreading out of Israel, means it has people in every country, and businesses work closely with Mossad, meaning that it has influence in places where people don't suspect. Then there is the Bible, which says that they're God's chosen people, so that means support from within Christianity, including the Christian Zionists in the US who support the Greater Israel Plan. And Professor Zhang says it will achieve this when the US leaves the Middle East, as Israel will inherit the military bases it will leave behind. So their pawns are basically everyone else, and they own a lot of the world's internet technology, meaning access to surveillance, people's personal data, and software like facial recognition, which they can claim assists in the war on terror by locating wanted terrorists. So now to Iran, which is a theocracy, but the majority of people there apparently are not religious zealots at all, like the mullahs who rule them, so they're in constant danger of alienating the population. And its grand strategy is to unite the Middle East under its leadership and replace Saudi Arabia, which it says is allied with the US, which it calls the Great Satan. So now we're going to have a problem, because it's linked to the war on terrorism in the sense that it believes that the only solution to the problem is to get all Western influence out of the Middle East, which is the opposite of what the US believes, which is to get the revolutionary influence out of the Middle East. And that's why the US wants this Iranian regime completely gone. So the attack vectors there are its proxies, which are managed with the help of Russia at the Quds network, which is basically the Iranian kind of CIA, really, which is a comparable size to the CIA. Hezbollah, Houthis, and Hamas. Its geography is a big ally because it's mountainous, which can hide armies and infrastructure, whereas Iraq's flat desert made it very easy to invade and control. So it's got a system using 31 different decentralized armies spread across its various territories, so it'd be very hard to invade and actually conquer the whole country. Religious ideology is not going to stop, so essentially its pawns are its own people. The use of its historical position as a contender to the West, and also the way that the Persian Empire was the rebellious part of the very most original world order, even before ancient Greece and Rome. So its culture goes back thousands of years, and it's got very deep kind of analysis of the way that other countries have behaved over time. And the US being a relatively new country, it looks like this could be another Vietnam, because they want to invade and they think that their military is going to conquer, but they have precisely the wrong kind of technology and strategy to actually win this one. So people are predicting that Iran would win in the event of a full-scale war with the US, and this would alter the geopolitical state of affairs because it would severely weaken the West. So here we are, but because we can see the educated people at the UN are able to follow the situation as well and include everybody's analysis, it means that the solutions to the problems of nations at each phase can be found. And we can see how the world system is effectively entering the Anthropocene at large, while protecting the world's public from the way things have been done, as they were not really aware of what was happening, as the shift to people understanding the objective framework of the ages was just being put into place. And so you can see all these sort of upgrades that we've had recently to the sort of sense of humanism, and loads of stuff on the internet about raising your consciousness level, and without really specifying any particular type of education, because it's kind of about the whole thing. And the kind of increase in the feeling of possibility and people being able to reach their full potential is becoming very politicized. And it seems like the people that are managing this change, they are aware of what's happening. They're aware of the proportions in which things that are happening in. So I might find out who they are actually, but I think that they'd be going on inside the UN, and there'd be a team, and people wouldn't be necessarily aware where they're actually getting their intelligence from, but it would be from reports, maybe through access to reports from around the world. Perhaps even military intelligence of the people that wrote those reports aren't even aware that the UN's actually been looking at them. So it's basically, the problem is really that people can't really see what's going to come out the other side of this, and most people not really knowing how we actually went into it. Even if you understand it, it doesn't necessarily mean that everyone else is going to as well. So that's why I think it's essential that we need to have a record of what's really happened. So then over time, then we can actually get everybody kind of on the same page about it. But then while it's happening, it is a case of these kind of four perspectives being very divisive and being kind of just really part of how the whole world works, but being fundamentally what's kind of in the middle of all this Middle Eastern conflict is Western support for Israel, Eastern support for Gaza, and then also you've got a lot of humanitarian support for Gaza from the rest of the world, and you've also got support for Western capitalism within Eastern society. So it does seem like a case of working out how to kind of make these agendas turn into something which can be managed without a direct conflict happening. And this is kind of what I was saying about there should be a difference between the Anthropocene and what happened in the Holocene, because we can see that we're going to have this sort of transitionary period. So my prediction is not World War III, but that things continue to improve despite the problems we face, and to look at the structure of history of the system to see what we can use to predict the future.